If the root of the food crisis is the treatment and mass-scale farming of animals, then the impersonal relationship we have with food is the catalyst that is fueling the issue to an exponential scale. An easy question that a lot of people like to pose themselves to measure their own morality is their own capability to kill an animal for basic survival.
What's his moral barometer?
My personal belief is that most people will do anything necessary to ensure that they live to see another day. So if you could somehow convince yourself that you're too morally bound to take the life of a chicken or a cow, if you hadn't eaten for 3 days, I think you'd pretty easily cast aside your philosophy for a meal. And I'm not going after vegans when I say this. Now, I'm going for those types of people that can go a day or two without thinking what they're actually eating. Because vegans basically look at this question and come up with an answer. The answer is lazy, in my opinion, but at least they made a practical and ethical decision after disagreeing with the dilemma presented. It's those people who can switch off any deeper thinking when it comes to a sugary snack that are currently grinding my gears. Unfortunately, it's the most quickest and cheapest meals that are disconnected from the ethical sourcing of food. If you're like me and you're often thinking about your nutrient goals like high protein or low fat, then you'd also suffer the same fate. Instead of buying one whole chicken, you'll buy a multi-pack of chicken breasts, meaning instead of buying one chicken and taking it to the blade, you've basically taken 3 and discarded the rest. You might not have physically done it yourself, but in spirit, that's exactly what you've done. But that's just on a personal scale. It's a growing pattern that we're heading towards, or just settling for a bowl of nutritious mulch or food shrapnel, making meals days ahead of when we actually need them, conveniently storing them in a freezer or a fridge. It's nearly dystopian how completely disconnected and impersonal our meals have become from what the meal once was, which is a conscious being existing separate from the purpose we've reduced it to. A plate of basic nutrition. I mean, if it even boils down to it, the language we use, we give our foods different names than what they actually are in their non-food context. Chicken farming is called poultry, cows are called beef, and pigs are called pork. When we talk about them happily living on old MacDonald's happy-go-lucky ethical farm of non-murder, they're chickens and cows and pigs and sheep. But when they're slaughtered, packaged and delivered, they're called meat produce. But we can't just blame this impersonal disposition we have of our food on just the consumer. I think we can take a closer look at the malicious distributor of this ethical dilemma. Just think about how this happens on a mass scale. When you walk into a supermarket, there's often a strong focus on convenience and meals ready to go, whether they're packaged meals from a microwave or from the freezers or frozen food. Here in the UK, the regular student or office worker relies solely on the £3 meal deal for the majority of their everyday convenience. A £3 meal deal will cost you obviously £3, and as satisfying as it is to bring your meal down from £4.50 to £3, the sandwich in the mix probably contains a sort of meat. The meat might be breast or bacon, which comes separate from the corpse of the butchery and sold to meet the high demands of these producers, retailers and farmers. And then comes the nugget. But for this video, I can't just settle on a frozen nugget. I'm going for the jugular. I'm heading for the top of gourmet chicken nuggets, McDonald's. And because I'm a glutton, I always get the 20 box. According to the McDonald's website, out of 22 listed ingredients, the only meat component used is chicken breast, which makes up for about 45% of the whole nugget, the rest being batter and oil. So again, we have the same problem of the chicken being shredded into components and selectively used and discarded. Even if the other parts of the chicken are recycled or used in another recipe, as the consumer, you're partaking in the death of the chicken for the sole purpose of attaining a fraction of the kill. And I think I've focused on the conscious adult consumer for the majority of the argument and not nearly enough on the peddling of these irresponsible death nuggets to the feeble-minded children. Take for example this McDonald's ad for a 20-box chicken nugget from 1984.
Hope we're going to a New Year's Eve party.
I'd prefer an office party.
I want to go to a school Christmas party.
McDonald's Chicken McNuggets 20-pack, the life of any holiday party.
It's pretty evident that the ad was meant to reach every possible demographic. The talking googly-eyed nuggets are talking about an office party, which obviously no children would be attending, meaning they're suggesting the box for adults. At the same time, the aforementioned chicken nuggets speak in shrill, high-pitched voices, making the method of the advertisement clearly targeted towards children. The main demographic of the advert is buckling down on the memorability of the nuggets in the minds of children, while trying to appeal to adults who are inevitably going to purchase the nuggets for these simple-minded minions of sugar and oil, children. At this point, more ethical questions start to rise, like how could you expect children to limit themselves to the amount of nuggets to the recommended portion size, or why such a large amount of nuggets are so cheap in comparison to the smaller portions. But I'd rather focus on the question at hand. Why are children sheltered from the reality of our food comes from, and instead sold this false nature of poorly shaped inanimate objects? In my opinion, it's the shielding of this that stems the habit of separation of ethics from food. Thinking of another food product that is victim of this might be a burger, where a specific cut of the beef might be used to craft a certain kind of burger, or steak for that fact. A particular kind of cut, such as ribeye, is probably in much higher demand than the other parts of the cow, such as organs. This would mean that more cows raised and slaughtered to satisfy the demand of only this particular kind of cut. This leaves the rest of the cow to be recycled and or reappropriated in some other food product, industrial use, or discarded entirely, all for the sake of profit. While I was researching reasons why chicken, beef and pork are the main primary sources of meat in the Euro-Western world, I came across this core answer from Kathleen Piper, who is apparently a food activist. I'm sure she's a great person, but her answer really didn't sit with me well. It really gave off this impersonal separation I keep talking about. It keeps discussing things like protein conversion and efficient utilization of farm animals to serve purposes like waste disposal. And it might just be the language used to display the factual qualitative purposes of the animals, but it really just screams, I'm not responsible. So continuing to move away from the slaughtering aspect, there is the issue of ethical farming as a whole, whether the modern industrialization of farming is as beneficial as it is morally destructive. According to the findings from The Guardian and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in 2020, there is a steady incline of 7% what are known of as intensive farms in the UK. It's especially prolific in farming of chickens and pigs. Although for a farm to be described as intensive, it depends on the variable of housing. In order for chickens to be farmed in the capacity of intensive, the numbers have to exceed 40,000. For pigs, it's only 2,000. Now, these excessive numbers don't just come from some sort of twisted desire for mass murder of chickens. This comes from the rising demand of the suppliers that we discussed earlier. And the demand of these suppliers comes from the aspect of cost-effective convenience that is demanded from the consumer. So we'll take this out of full loop, shall we? To boil down my entire perspective to one easy clickbaity hook, millions and millions and millions of chickens, pigs and cows are unnecessarily slaughtered annually in order to keep up with the disconnection that we've created between food and its source. The reality of this won't go away easily because the truth is so far disconnected by the industrialization of food provisions that we shelter ourselves from. We all know it's bad, but it's so easy for us to turn a blind eye and keep binging. The answer isn't a bulimic purge towards vegetarianism that's being shoved in front of us by meat-free companies or vegans. It's simply to change our relationship with food farming. As a species, we need to return to patterns of whole food consumption. We need to be thinking about exactly what we put on our plates and how necessary many of our eating habits are. And it's inevitably going to start with you, the listener. More precisely, it starts with those who can afford it. You don't need to spill your wallets to the mercy of these whole food, health-oriented, woke company snake oil salesmen. It just needs someone to be able to pick up a sack of potatoes that was locally sourced and not the bag of Doritos. The frozen blueberries that can be blended into a smoothie and not a grape soda. the whole chicken and not just those juicy, juicy chicken nuggets.